Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. Previously, a broke finance student named Yoga was offered a card that would allow him to withdraw absurd amounts of money. The catch is that he must give a man named Masaki his future as collateral. Yoga eventually gives into temptation as he accepts the card and is told that he must compete in a battle at least once a week in another realm. He fights as an entrepreneur with his asset named Mashiyu and uses money to buy powerful attacks, but is shocked when he finds that his next opponent is his finance professor. The story continues as Yoga battles his professor. The professor explains that he was invited to the financial district a year and a half ago and apologizes to Yoga as he must defeat him now since he earns money to support his family there. We also see the time when Yoga met his professor's wife just before she was about to have their third child. The professor deals fight-ending damage to Yoga, but Mashiyu instructs him to sell some of her stock. Mikuni is quick to buy her stock for 50 million, allowing Yoga to recover and unleash a mesoflation level attack. Yoga has profited for winning the deal, but we see that the professor has gone bankrupt. The professor is upset as he was clearly winning and thinks Yoga cheated. He is instantly exiled as Yoga didn't break any rules and just conducted normal business. Yoga would later learn that assets come with 10 shares, and 9 of those can be sold to the public. Afterwards, Yoga attempts to thank Mikuni for helping, but Mikuni explains that it wasn't help, it was an investment in him. Yoga is told by the driver that what happens to entrepreneurs after bankruptcy depends on the entrepreneur. Many, like Yoga's father, take their own lives, but the reason why is unclear. Elsewhere, we find that Mikuni's guild, called the Starling Guild, has over 1,200 members, which accounts for 1/3 of the financial district, and once they get to 50%, they might be able to control the entire place. At school, Yoga feels a bit strange when he sees his professor walk in. At lunch, the news states that another young child has died, and Hanabi points out how that has been strangely happening so frequently recently. Afterwards, Yoga tries to apologize for the fight, but the professor just asks Yoga to meet with him later. The professor then brings Yoga to his home, where he explains that he accepted Masaki's offer to come to the financial district instantly, since raising children on a professor's salary alone is impossible. The professor fought to support his wife and 3 kids, and becomes upset when he finds that Yoga is still searching for his reason to enter deals. Yoga questions his own victory, but the professor stops him and points out that making connections with someone as powerful as Mikuni is a strength. The professor then states how vague the word future seemed when he gave his future to Masaki as collateral, but explains that he completely understands now that he is bankrupt. Yoga stays for dinner as he notices that the professor's wife is no longer pregnant and asks her if she has already given birth. She looks at him strangely as if it's a random question, and Yoga is in absolute disbelief as the professor explains that they don't have any children. Afterward, the professor explains to Yoga that it's been arranged so that his children never existed in the first place. His children only exist in his memories now, and he explains that the world is changing just like this, gradually beyond anyone's conception. Yoga tries to apologize, but the professor points out how if Yoga lost, then he would be the one suffering. Yoga doesn't want to continue taking things from others or having things taken, but the professor points out that that is how the real world is as well. The professor wishes he would have joined Mikuni's Starling Guild, and explains to Yoga that it's an organization that wants to reduce the effect that the financial district has on their world. Joining the guild takes away an entrepreneur's opportunity to gain large profits, but they will also no longer go bankrupt. Elsewhere, Q reveals to Mikuni that the city is creaking as things are beginning to reach their limit. She states that buildings are creaking when they lean to the left or the right, so there is no solution. Yoga arrives upset as he has realized that continually winning deals is hell, but losing is hell also. Mikuni thinks it's clear that winning is the only answer, but Yoga points out how heartaching that is. Mikuni reveals that he has a method for avoiding it, but before he can say it, Masaki appears to escort him to his deal, and Mikuni invites Yoga to see for himself. We then watch as Mikuni prepares for battle as several people are there to watch, and it is explained that his fights are so popular because Mikuni spends so much money to put on a show. Their fight begins as his opponent named Kikuchi denies Mikuni's request to join his guild, and instantly pins Mikuni down. A check of the balance sheet though shows that Mikuni isn't losing much money, but Kikuchi is spending a lot on his attack. Kikuchi then sells his asset stock, and someone points out how Mikuni will have 15 billion yuan, while after the sale, Kikuchi will have 39 billion. Mikuni still manages to skillfully land a devastating attack, but a spectator points out how Kikuchi's defense is frighteningly powerful, as Mikuni is the one to actually take damage. Kikuchi is confident he will win as time is about to run out, but Mikuni amazes everyone as he calls upon another asset. This asset ends Kikuchi's attacks, and Mikuni lands the final blow to defeat Kikuchi. Afterward, Yoga congratulates Mikuni but doesn't look very impressed, and he explains that he still doesn't want to be like Mikuni. Mikuni points out how the old man he just defeated was strong, but if someone goes bankrupt with that much money, then the influence on their real world will be greater. The key to enjoying deals is not winning too much or losing too much, while thinking about the effect it will have on your surroundings and profiting the smallest amount possible each time. To do that, Yoga must become as powerful as he is, since everything will be fine if Yoga can just achieve the power to control his wins and losses. Yoga is convinced as he doesn't want to cause anyone pain and decides to give it a try. Sometime later, we watch as members of Mikuni's guild enter deals and win very easily, but just barely. Mikuni explains to Yoga that in order to minimize the effect upon the real world, their members must win with the smallest gap possible. To do this, one must know their opponent well, but what is most important is to understand their own strength inside and out. Yoga realizes that understanding his asset is most important during deals, since they are the source of an entrepreneur's strength, and Michiu appears to answer questions. Afterward, Yoga enters a deal as Michiu explains that assets are entrepreneurs' personal property, and is confused when Yoga wonders about if an asset's feelings matter. While his fight begins, we are told that guild members from all over are paying their membership fees. Yoga's opponent manages to trap Michiu as Yoga notices that he is using up his money to do it. Yoga takes heavy damage though as Michiu isn't able to help, but Yoga uses Flation to get her out. Yoga manages to get out of the tough situation, but he notices that time is running out, and he needs 2.4 million more yuan. He surprises Michiu by instructing her to just guard him, and he lands a powerful attack on his opponent. Yoga stops Michiu from following up his attack though, as it will earn him too much, but she is attacked and he ends up losing by a little instead. Elsewhere, Mikuni makes a deal that leaves the country's vice president amazed at how Mikuni can single-handedly shoulder a country's debt. He points out how the country would fall apart without Mikuni, and explains that Mikuni is throwing money into government bonds to help the people of the country. Later, Yoga speaks with the driver, who is amused to see that Yoga has finally lost. Yoga explains that it was only by a little, but the driver reveals that people have had their houses burned down after only losing by a little. Yoga arrives home relieved to find that it isn't burned down, but calls his aunt, who explains that she will be in the hospital for a week as her appendix burst. The next day, he finds that he has failed his finance class, and determines that the future he has lost isn't so bad, but remembers Hanabi. Nothing about her was influenced at all, but this seems to upset Yoga a bit. Elsewhere, Jennifer is complimented on leaked data she gave to her organization, and receives information about the financial district. That night, Yoga is glad to see that Michiu has healed, but she is upset that he stopped her from attacking. She explains that even if she heals easily, attacks still hurt, but she gets distracted when Yoga starts doing something. He must then explain to her what food is, and points out that eating delicious food is fun. He begins to let her try some, but changes his mind and tells her that he will just bring her some eventually. Later, Kikuchi enters another deal against someone with vast wealth as well. Yoga is told that no matter who loses, the real world will unfortunately be affected greatly. A guild member is disappointed to see Kikuchi risking everything again after Mikuni kept them from going bankrupt, and determines that they must hurry up and gain control of the financial district soon. Kikuchi's opponent lands a devastating attack as he wants to take it all, but Kikuchi won't give up and lands a powerful counterattack. Afterwards, Yoga returns to the real world to find that Kikuchi's pharmaceutical company is going bankrupt, and he is being investigated for embezzlement. Yoga is surprised to see how badly Kikuchi's future was destroyed, and even more horrified when the professor explains that a chain reaction of bankruptcies could cause the economy to suffer a loss of hundreds of billions, and affects hundreds of thousands of people. Yoga is then stunned to hear that the professor's wife has left him, and he has started to wonder how much of his life with the wife and kids was reality and how much he was just imagining. In the financial district, Michiu tells Yoga that his plan for their next fight won't work, and he must be more accurate when assessing his abilities if he wants to do something as complicated as control fights. The informant then appears, surprised to see him feeding his asset, and sells Yoga information on Kikuchi's pharmaceutical company. He reveals that another pharmaceutical company will be purchasing all their debt, and the person behind it was Mikuni. Thanks to this, the effective deals should have very little impact on the real world for some time to come. Yoga meets with Mikuni, who confirms the information and explains that his goal is to have his guild eventually control the entire financial district, as it will make it easier to control the effect the deals have on the real world. Yoga wonders why he is trying so hard, and Mikuni simply thinks that someone has to do it. Mikuni goes on to explain how he was amazed by the financial district at first, but instantly knew that Midas money was clearly evil. However, he eventually realized that just as you can't overturn reality, you also cannot overturn the financial district. Just like you can't stop the system that circulates real money, you can't stop Midas money from entering it. They must coexist, and Mikuni just wants to strike a balance and control the benefits each world receives. Yoga can't get comfortable with evil money circulating, but Mikuni states that rather than seeing people starve in a clean and innocent world, he chooses a dirty and polluted peace. Afterwards, Mikuni is asked by a guild member why he has his eyes set on Yoga, and points out all of Yoga's flaws. Mikuni reveals that Yoga is simply a hobby of his. People that are obsessed by money cannot move it freely, and so that is why he chose Yoga. A bit later, Yoga is formally registered into Mikuni's guild, but one member wonders if it's too soon to have someone of Yoga's level do a balance deal against someone on the dangerous list. Mikuni is confident that it won't have that great of an effect on the real world, and Yoga's deal begins. Elsewhere, a news broadcaster interviews a very wealthy man, and Jennifer's information reveals that his name is Sonoza. He is 29 years old with a fortune worth 10 billion, and a deal record of 56 wins and 1 loss. His next deal is scheduled to be in 1 week, and his opponent is Yoga. In the financial district, Yoga battles this week's opponent as he runs from an asset. Mashiu manages to take it down, and they find the entrepreneur he is fighting. The man is prepared for defeat, but Yoga explains that he will only be taking what he spent. Afterwards, Mashiu explains how good it feels to win, but Yoga doesn't want to hear that kind of talk. She points out how it's okay since she only exists to help him win, and Yoga states how glad he is that he doesn't have an asset that looks like a monster. As they have lunch, Sonoza approaches them as he compliments Mashiu and explains to Yoga that he is his next opponent. He reveals that entrepreneurs can pass on deals, but they must pay half their fortune to the bank. Sonoza offers to pay Yoga's debt so he can pass on their deal, and must explain that paying for his own pass would be too much, but paying for Yoga's is something he can easily afford. Sonoza explains that he makes the same offer to all his opponents, but no one has ever accepted. He points out that no matter how well you balance a deal, there is no way to avoid having some effect on reality, and the best thing to do is avoid the deal altogether. He doesn't force Yoga to decide now, and as he leaves, Yoga can't help but think he has seen him before. Yoga's research reveals that Sonoza is famous for being an incredible philanthropist, and is called the Prince of Volunteers. Afterwards, Yoga is tricked into getting in a van, and Jennifer introduces herself as an entrepreneur investigating the financial district. She explains that there are only 2 types of people in the financial district, those that have been sucked in and those that haven't. She believes that herself, Yoga, and Mikuni all have not been sucked in. Jennifer reveals that in order to stabilize the economy, there is no doubt that Mikuni intends to use up his own future. She isn't sure though if Mikuni realizes what he is really doing, but Yoga is just confused by all the information. Jennifer puts it simply though and reveals that they will all be in danger if they don't destroy the financial district. She wants Yoga to cooperate with her, but he gets upset when she reveals that they must take down organizations like Mikuni's Starling Guild to destroy the financial district. Yoga points out how Mikuni's intervention in the pharmaceutical incident saved thousands of people, but Jennifer points out how no one knows just how much of his future was taken for it. She explains that he doesn't have to decide now, and reveals that Mikuni is watching Yoga's next opponent as well. Sonoza was invited to the guild just like he was, but he declined. Just then, the two evade a car that is following them, and the driver doesn't seem too pleased. Sometime later, Yoga goes to see Sonoza, who is giving a philanthropic speech since Jennifer recommended he do so, as Sonoza is also struggling with how he believes reality in the financial district should be. The two talk, and Sonoza explains that the financial gap is widening without ease, and the large sums of money being injected into their country from the other world are destroying the economy's balance. Sonoza then shows Yoga drawings he has received from countries he has sent vaccines to. He explains that he sees a theme in them all, and that it's everyone's futures. Sonoza explains that he only lost once and it was a small loss, but he returned to find that all the drawings had changed. Parts of them disappeared along with the future they had painted. Back in the financial district, Yoga speaks with Mashiu about passing on the deal, and she expresses how upset she is about not fighting in general. Mikuni shows up, and Yoga is surprised to hear that he already knows about Yoga thinking about passing. Mikuni explains that he knows because that's how Sonoza always does things, and reveals that Sonoza came to him before asking that he pass as well. Mikuni points out that it was impossible for Sonoza to afford half his fortune, and Yoga now realizes that Sonoza's one loss was at Mikuni's hands. Mikuni explains that Sonoza's thought process only works for those that have power. Those who are powerless are day by day living each moment preciously. He points out that Sonoza had probably lived his life without ever feeling his freedom restricted, and has lost his sensitivity to the blood that pollutes the air around money. Mikuni wants Yoga to do as he pleases with his battle, but explains that he can't escape the city, and fighting and winning is the only answer. The next day, Yoga arrives at his deal, and Sonoza is surprised to see that Yoga didn't accept his offer. Sonoza thinks it's a foolish decision, and Mashiu tells Yoga to give it his all now that he has decided. Sonoza's attack does significant damage to Mashiu though, and she explains that she doesn't believe she will be able to hold up. She still does her best to protect Yoga, but it only results in taking more damage. Sonoza is completely emotionless as he continues his attack and brings Mashiu near death. She tries to tell Yoga that she will heal right up from the damage, and explains that there is no choice but to take him head on. It's clear to her that Yoga doesn't really want to win, but Yoga explains that he doesn't want to lose either. What he is most afraid of though is losing what's close to him. The two decide to use a mesolflation attack even though it's dangerous considering Mashiu's health, and the scene jumps to just after the fight. Sonoza explains to Yoga that he has decided to vacate his office and start over with a select few of his staff. Yoga wonders if the loss really affected him that much, and Sonoza simply expresses his disbelief at how Yoga and Mashiu came at him with two mesolflation attacks in their state. Sonoza realizes now that he underestimated Yoga, and now believes that Yoga is someone that can fight his way out of the financial district. Yoga asks about the drawings on his wall, but he doesn't really want to know the answer. Sonoza heads off to his new office, but before he does, he leaves Yoga with a gift to give Mashiu. Thanks for watching part 2, 3,000 likes and I'll know you want a part 3. Also, all other parts are in a pinned comment below.